"We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." But what she didn't know was... The morning sun hit the curtain softly when she said it, her voice calm, her face distant. I was pouring coffee the same way I had every morning for years. The beach house was more than wood and walls. It was the last place that still smelled like her father, the laughter, the summers, the quiet after storms. When she said the words, I felt the ground shift, but I didn't show it. I just asked, "What did you say, Anna?" And she smiled that tired smile that hides too much and said, "I sold it, Mom. We'd be leaving tomorrow." The sound of the word sold didn't fit in the air. It felt wrong, like a crack through something sacred. I looked at her, and for a second, I didn't see the woman she had become. I saw my little girl with sand on her cheeks, chasing waves in the same yard she now wanted to sell. She turned away, busying herself with her phone, her voice too quick when she said it. "It's just a house, Mom. You don't even go there anymore." But what she didn't know was that every night I went there in my dreams. I walked through the hallway, I opened the old blue door, and I heard her father laugh again. That house wasn't a building, it was memory breathing. I asked why she sold it without telling me. She said she needed the money, that it was time to move on, that holding on to old things only hurts us more. I heard the rehearsed tone in her voice, like she had said it to herself too many times before. I asked, "Move on from what, Anna?" And she looked at me, her eyes shining too bright, and said, "From everything, Mom. From debt, from mistakes, from the past." Something in me tightened. She had never talked about mistakes before. She was always the strong one, the planner, the one who saved every receipt, who knew how to fix things before they broke. But now she looked like someone standing on a cliff, pretending not to see how high it was. I asked where we were going, and she said to the city. She said she got a new job, a better one. I said that was good, but why sell the house? Why not just rent it? She said it was complicated. Complicated always means something else. That night I couldn't sleep. The moonlight fell through the blinds like a ghost hand on the floor. I went into her old room and looked at the packed boxes. She was really leaving. I sat on her bed and found an envelope under the pillow with my name written on it. I hesitated before opening it because sometimes knowing hurts more than not knowing. Inside was a receipt from a bank and a photo. The receipt was for a loan I had never heard about, taken 3 months ago under her name, but the photo made my heart stop. It was of Anna and a man standing outside a small house I didn't recognize. He was smiling, but she wasn't. Her eyes looked tired, almost scared. I folded the photo slowly. I knew I couldn't ask yet, not without losing her. I just needed to wait until morning. The next day she woke me early. Her car was already packed. She looked beautiful and broken all at once. I asked again about the house, and she said the buyer was someone from her work, that it was already done and there was nothing I could do. I told her I wasn't angry, just confused. She hugged me and said, "You'll understand one day." We drove in silence. The road curved through fields, still wet with dew. She turned the radio on but didn't really listen. I watched her hands on the wheel, the way they trembled slightly. She had her father's hands, and I remembered how those same hands had once held mine when she learned to walk. After 2 hours, she stopped at a gas station. She said she needed a minute. I watched her walk to the payphone, yes, a payphone, and talk to someone quickly, her shoulders tense. When she came back, her smile was gone. I asked who it was. She said just work. But what she didn't know was that I had seen the name on the caller ID reflected in the glass. It said David R., the same name written on the back of the photo. When we reached the city, she parked near an old building with cracked walls. She said we would stay there for a few days until the new place was ready. She carried her suitcase upstairs and I followed. The apartment was small, with one window and no pictures on the walls. It smelled like dust and secrets. That night she went to take a shower. I walked around and found her purse half open on the table. A small piece of paper stuck out. It was another receipt, but this time it was from a hospital. Patient, Anna Reed. Reason, trauma evaluation. My knees almost gave out. When she came out, I tried to act normal, but she saw my face and froze. She asked what I found. I held the paper out and said nothing. Just waited. She sat down slowly on the couch, her towel still around her shoulders. She said it wasn't what I thought, but her voice broke before she finished. She started to cry quietly, like someone who had practiced hiding it too long. Then she told me everything. David wasn't from work. He was her ex. The man she had met after her father's funeral, when she was too lonely to think clearly. He had been kind at first, too kind. Then controlling. Then cruel. She said she left him, but he found her again. He started calling, threatening, showing up at her office. He knew about the beach house and said if she didn't give him the money, he would ruin her life. So she sold it. I listened, and my chest felt hollow. She said she thought it would make him stop, that she could buy her peace. But he wanted more. She said he wanted me too, my property, my name, my silence. I felt rage rise inside me, but also guilt. She had fought this battle alone because she thought I couldn't handle it. She thought losing the house would hurt me more than her pain. I told her we were going to fix it together. She said it was too late. But what she didn't know was I still had something left, something her father left me that no one knew about. The next morning I went to the bank. I asked for the manager and showed him the old envelope I had kept since my husband's death. Inside was a document signed by him giving me access to a trust fund he had created years ago. Enough to buy back the house and more. I didn't tell Anna yet. I wanted to see how far this man would go. That night he came. We heard a knock at the door. Anna froze. I told her to stay inside. I opened it, and there he was, the man from the photo, older, colder. He smiled and said, "You must be the mother." I said yes, and you must be the mistake. He laughed like he owned the air. He said she owed him and he wanted what was his. I said, "You'll get what's yours, but not the way you think." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, already recording, and said, "You just admitted you threatened her." His face changed fast from arrogance to fear. He tried to leave, but the sound of sirens stopped him. I had called the police before opening the door. They arrested him for extortion and harassment. Anna was shaking when they took him away. I hugged her tight and told her it was over. She asked about the house, and I told her I bought it back. She cried harder this time, not from pain but from relief. Months passed. The house by the sea was ours again. The walls still remembered laughter, but now they had peace too. Anna planted flowers by the porch, the same kind her father used to love. Sometimes she sits by the shore and says she can finally breathe again. She never knew that the day she said, "We're going tomorrow, Mom," I had already decided I would follow her anywhere. And maybe that's what love really is, not holding on to the walls that kept you safe, but following someone into the storm until they find their light again. The sea was calmer now, and the air smelled of salt and new beginnings. I stood by the window watching the sunlight dance on the water, while Anna brewed coffee in the kitchen. It was strange how silence could feel full, not empty. There were no more secrets, no more hidden tears, only the quiet sound of waves rolling in like slow forgiveness. She asked if I wanted to walk down to the beach. I said yes, even though my legs were tired. We hadn't walked there together in years. The sand was cool and the wind played with her hair the same way it did when she was a child. She smiled and said it feels smaller than I remember, and I told her that's because we grew bigger. She laughed softly and said she missed this place. I said it missed her too. She asked if I was angry about what she had done. I told her anger has no home where love lives. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, I don't deserve you. I told her, you are the reason I learned forgiveness. We sat on the sand for a while, saying nothing. The waves spoke enough for both of us. I could see the weight leaving her shoulders slowly, like fog lifting from the shore. She looked at the horizon and whispered, I want to start over. I told her then, start right here. Days turned into weeks. The house felt alive again. She began painting the walls a soft cream color, the way her father had always wanted. I cooked her favorite meals and she started writing again. She said it helped her heal. Every night she left her door open just a little, like she did when she was a girl afraid of the dark. I knew it meant she was learning to trust the world again. One morning, a letter came from the courthouse. It was about the case against David. I didn't want her to see it, but she noticed the seal. She said she wanted to handle it herself this time. So I sat beside her as she opened it. The letter said he was sentenced to 3 years and ordered to pay restitution. She sighed deeply and said it feels like something finally ended. I told her no. It feels like something finally began. That afternoon we drove to the city to close the last bank account connected to the sale. The manager recognized me and smiled, saying it was rare to see people get back what they lost. I said sometimes loss is what shows you what truly matters. On the way home, we stopped at the cliff above the beach. The wind was strong and the sun was turning gold. She asked me if I ever thought her father could see us. I said always. She smiled and said then he must be proud. I told her he would be more than proud, he would be at peace. That night while she slept, I sat on the porch watching the stars. The ocean shimmered like a field of light. I thought about everything we had survived, the silence, the fear, the lies, the forgiveness. I realized that home was never the house. It was the love that refused to leave even when everything else did. In the morning, she made breakfast and said she had something to tell me. I saw the nervous sparkle in her eyes. She said she got an offer from a local art gallery to display her paintings. I asked what paintings, and she said the ones I started while you were asleep, the ones about hope. I smiled and told her this is just the beginning. We spent the next few days preparing her work. She painted the beach, the cliffs, the sunsets, and one painting that looked exactly like the night her father proposed to me under the old lantern near the dock. She said she remembered the story so vividly she could see it when she closed her eyes. The gallery opening was small but beautiful. People stopped and stared at her work and whispered words like breathtaking and alive. A man approached her and said, "Your art feels like it's healing something inside me." She smiled politely, but I saw how those words reached her heart. When we got home, she hugged me long and tight and said I never thought I would feel free again. I told her freedom was always waiting. She just needed to walk back to it. One evening, a letter arrived again, but this time it wasn't from the court. It was from the man who bought the house originally, before I bought it back. He wrote that he had heard what happened and that he wanted to return the small boat that came with the property because he felt it belonged to us. The boat was old but strong, like memory itself. We went to pick it up. It was resting on the shore, covered in dust and seaweed. She ran her hand along the wood and said, "I remember learning to row here." I told her then, "Let's do it again." We pushed the boat into the water and rowed out together. The ocean was calm, the sky wide and forgiving. She closed her eyes and said, "I feel like he's here with us." And I said he never left. We floated there until the stars appeared one by one. She said, "I want to name my next painting after the storm." I said, "That's perfect, because that's what we are now after the storm." A few weeks later, she got another letter, but this time it was from an art magazine. They wanted to feature her story and her work. She cried again, this time from joy. She said, "Maybe my pain can help someone else find peace." I told her that's the most beautiful purpose any heart can have. As the months passed, our home filled with light, laughter, and visitors. People came to see the paintings, to listen to her story, and to find hope in it. She became someone new, not because she forgot who she was, but because she forgave who she was. And one night, as the sky turned deep blue, she said, "Mom, thank you for never giving up on me." I said, how could I when you were the reason I learned what strength really means? We sat there in the quiet again, just like that first morning when everything changed, except this time it was different. This time it was peace, not pain. The morning sun touched the curtains like gentle forgiveness. The house smelled of paint and coffee, and the sound of seagulls drifted through the open window. Anna stood in front of her canvas, her hair tied back, her hands covered in color. She looked so alive that for a moment I forgot the years of hurt that had come before. She turned and smiled and said, I finally know what I want to paint next. I asked what, and she said, I want to paint you. I laughed softly and said, why me? And she said, because you are the reason the light still comes through the cracks. I sat by the window as she sketched me in quiet focus. The brush moved like music, her eyes full of purpose. I could see her peace in every stroke. In the evenings, she started walking to the market again. People would stop her to talk about her art. She smiled easily now. There was a young man who always greeted her near the flower stall. His name was Ben. He was kind and simple, and his hands smelled of fresh lilies. I noticed the way her face changed when he spoke. She said he reminded her that life could still surprise you. One day she brought him to the house. He carried a bouquet of white roses for me and said I wanted to meet the woman who raised the strongest person I know. His voice was steady and his eyes honest. I liked him immediately. They talked for hours by the porch about art and the ocean and second chances. When the evening came, he helped her cover her paintings with cloth to protect them from the night breeze. I saw how gently he treated her work, and I thought maybe this time she had found something true. Weeks turned into months. Her name began to appear in local papers. The gallery that had first displayed her art asked her to hold another exhibition. This time it would be bigger. She called it The House by the Sea. She said it was not just about a place, it was about coming home to yourself. The night of the exhibition, I wore her father's favorite blue scarf. The gallery was filled with people, their voices soft, their faces lit by her art. On one wall there was a large painting of me sitting by the window, the same pose she had captured that morning months ago. Under it she wrote one line, "For the woman who taught me that love never leaves even when everything else does." Tears filled my eyes as she stood beside me holding my hand. The crowd applauded and she smiled through her tears. Ben stood behind her, his eyes full of pride. I whispered to her, "Your father would have been so proud," and she said, "I feel like he is here right now." After the show, we drove back home in silence, not the heavy silence of fear, but the soft silence of peace. She leaned her head on the window and said, "I think I'm finally ready to forgive myself." I said, "You already have." The next morning she found a letter on the doorstep. It was from the man who had once hurt her. He had written from prison saying he was sorry that he had found faith, that he wished her well. She read it slowly, then folded it, and said, "I hope he finds peace too." I saw no anger in her eyes, only acceptance. That was when I knew she was truly free. Days passed quietly. Ben began helping around the house, fixing things that had long been broken. One evening he asked me if I thought Anna would ever want to marry again. I smiled and said, "Ask her, not me." He said, "I will when the time feels right." I saw the same light in his eyes that her father once had. A few weeks later he proposed to her on the same beach where she had learned to walk. He wrote her name in the sand with a seashell and said, "You are my calm after every storm." She cried and said yes. I watched from the porch, the wind lifting her hair, the sea shimmering behind them. It felt like time itself was blessing them. Their wedding was small, just close friends, and the sound of waves. She wore a simple white dress and carried lilies, the same ones Ben used to sell. When she walked down the beach toward him, the world seemed still, like it was holding its breath. They exchanged vows under the golden sky, and when he said, "I will love you as long as the tides return," she smiled like someone who finally understood what forever means. After the ceremony, we all walked back to the house. The sun dipped low, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. Music played softly from a small speaker. She danced barefoot in the sand, laughing like she hadn't in years. I sat on the porch watching her, thinking how strange it was that the same place that once held so much sorrow now held so much joy. That night, when everyone had left, she came to sit beside me. She put her head on my shoulder and said, "Mom, do you ever miss Dad?" I said, "Every day, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels like love now." She smiled and said, "I think I understand that." The moon rose over the water, bright and full. She said, "I used to think I lost everything, but maybe I just had to lose myself to find who I was meant to be." I said, "That's how healing works. It breaks you open so light can get in." We stayed there until the stars blurred into morning. The waves kept singing their endless song, and I realized that life never really ends. It just changes shape. The days after the wedding felt like waking into a dream that finally made sense. The house by the sea had never been so alive. Laughter floated through every room. The porch smelled of salt and lilies and morning coffee. Ben fixed the old swing her father had built years ago, and Anna painted its chains gold as if to mark the beginning of something new. She started teaching art to children from the nearby village. They came with paint on their cheeks and stories in their eyes. She taught them how to mix color with memory, how to turn pain into pictures. I watched from the window, sometimes pretending to read, but really watching the way she smiled without fear. One afternoon after class, a little girl gave her a seashell and said, "This is for when you forget how brave you are." Anna held it like treasure. Later, she placed it on the shelf beside her wedding photo. She said that child reminded her of herself before the storm. Ben began building a small studio near the back garden. He said it would be her space to create freely. Every nail he hammered sounded like a promise. Some evenings I would bring them lemonade, and they would both stop and smile as if the whole world paused just to breathe with them. I started writing letters to her father again, letters I never sent. I told him how proud he would be, how our little girl found her way home, how love returned in the shape of kindness. Sometimes at night I could almost feel him there in the wind that whispered through the trees. One evening, Anna and Ben invited me for a walk. The sky was painted with shades of pink and gold. We reached the cliff that looked over the endless water. Anna said, "Mom, do you ever wonder what comes next after happiness?" I said, "Maybe more love, maybe just peace." She nodded and said, "I want to have a child someday, a place to pour all this love I've learned to hold." I told her that child would be born already blessed. Months later, she told me she was expecting. Her voice trembled when she said it, half laughter, half tears. I hugged her and whispered, "This is life giving you back what it once took." The months that followed were filled with small miracles. The sound of her laughter echoed through every room again, the same way it used to when she was little. The day her baby was born, the sky outside turned silver with rain, but inside the room there was only light. She named him Matthew, meaning gift of grace. When I held him for the first time, he opened his eyes and I saw the same calm ocean that had healed us all. The house changed again. Toys appeared in corners, lullabies filled the night. Ben sang softly to his son, while Anna painted small pictures for the nursery. She said every brushstroke felt like prayer. I told her that's because it was. Years passed quietly like waves brushing the same shore over and over, never tired, always gentle. Anna, as art traveled to other cities, her name became known, but she never left the beach house. She said it was where her heart learned to breathe. Sometimes strangers visited, asking to see the place that inspired her paintings. She would walk them through the rooms, telling them stories of storms and sunlight, of breaking and rebuilding. They always left with something in their eyes, something softer, something hopeful. When Matthew turned 5, he started painting too. His small fingers smudged colors into shapes that looked like dreams. One day he showed me a picture of 3 people holding hands near the sea. He said, "It's you and Mama and Papa and the waves are happy." I laughed through tears and said, "That's exactly right." As the years went by, I grew older, slower, softer, but the peace never left. I spent my mornings sitting on the porch with tea, watching the same tide I once feared now returning like an old friend. Sometimes Anna would join me, and we would sit without talking because silence between healed hearts feels like music. Ben expanded the studio into a community art center where children and adults came to learn to paint, to talk, to heal. They named it the Estelle Center after me. I cried when I saw the sign. Anna said it was because I taught her what home really means. Every corner of that place carried memory, the scent of rain on wood, the laughter of children, the whisper of brushes moving across canvas. People came broken and left whole again, and I thought maybe that was the purpose of all the pain we endured, to build a space where others could find their light. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, they held a small gathering at the beach. Friends, old and new, filled the shore with songs and candles. Anna wore the same white dress, now faded by time but still beautiful. She looked at Ben with the same love she had that day under the golden sky. When the music faded, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for staying even when I pushed you away." I said, "That's what love does. It waits until we remember who we are." As the night deepened, the sea reflected the stars like a mirror of heaven. Matthew ran along the shore, laughing his footprints chasing the tide. Anna watched him and whispered, "He has your calm, Mom." I smiled and said no. He has his own. We stood there together, 3 generations, held by the same wind, the same waves, the same grace that had carried us through every storm. I thought about that morning years ago when she said we were going tomorrow. "Mom, Ivy sold your beach house." It felt like another life, another world. And now here we were, still in that house, still breathing, still healing, still becoming. The morning sun poured through the curtains like forgiveness. The house smelled of sea salt and quiet. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting to still hear the echo of last night's storm. But there was only calm, that fragile kind of calm that comes after you've already cried everything out. Skylar was sitting on the porch, wrapped in one of my old shawls, staring at the ocean. Her hair moved in the breeze. She looked smaller, softer. I walked toward her, the floorboards creaking under my feet. She didn't turn, but I knew she felt me there. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head. "I kept hearing the waves. They sound different today." "They sound like peace," I said, sitting beside her. For a long time we just listened, to the rhythm of the water, to the birds calling over the cliffs, to the silence that didn't hurt anymore. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Mom, about the beach house. I didn't know how to tell you. Darius said we needed money, that we couldn't afford to keep it. He said you'd understand. I believed him." I placed my hand over hers. "You don't need to explain. You don't owe me anything. A house is just a place. What matters is that you're still here to see this morning." Her eyes filled again, but this time not with fear, with something gentler. "I thought you'd hate me." "I could never hate you," I said. "I might have lost a house, but I got my daughter back." The door opened behind us. Jordan stepped out, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Her hair was still messy from the night before, but her smile was light. "You two look like a movie poster," she teased, handing Skylar a mug. Skylar laughed, a real laugh this time, and it startled me. I hadn't heard that sound in so long that I'd almost forgotten what it did to me. It filled every broken space inside me with warmth. Jordan sat with us. "I sent the recordings to Detective Miles," she said quietly. "He called this morning. They've opened a full investigation. Darius is in custody." Skylar's hands trembled around her mug. "He's arrested?" Jordan nodded, and the captain himself signed the suspension order for the officers who ignored the earlier complaints. Miles said the neighbors gave full statements. For a moment, Skylar didn't move. Then she exhaled, a long, shaking breath that carried months of fear out of her lungs. "It's really over," she whispered. "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "It's over." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. Somewhere in the distance a bell rang from a fishing boat. The world felt alive again. Skylar turned to me. "Mom, can we stay here? Just for a while, before we figure out what's next." I smiled. "We're not going anywhere. This beach may not be ours on paper anymore, but it's still ours in memory. And as long as we're together, we'll make a new home, wherever that is." She leaned her head on my shoulder. Jordan rested hers on my other side. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. I thought about everything we'd survived. The lies, the fear, the silence. I thought about every woman who had walked into my courtroom once upon a time, trembling, desperate to be believed. And I realized something. Justice isn't always delivered by the system. Sometimes it's delivered by love, by courage, by the moment you decide enough is enough. Skylar spoke softly. "Thank you for coming for me, Mom." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "Always." The sun rose higher, scattering gold over the water. Skylar stood up, stretching, facing the horizon like she was meeting her future. Jordan took a picture, laughing. "Let's go inside," I said finally. "I'll make breakfast, and we'll talk about tomorrow. Not the tomorrow Darius tried to build, but the one we'll choose together." Skylar turned to me, her eyes bright, her voice steady. "We're going tomorrow, Mom," she said with a small smile. "But this time, it's to start over." And this time I believed her.